Hey guys, what's up? JC with Big Game Real Estate, and today we're talking residential leases versus commercial leases. Some of the pros and cons and differences. A lot of you guys are used to residential leases from being renters yourself, but let's jump into it. Okay, so we're out there, we're trying to invest in property. We're trying to figure out what's going to be the better investment, who's the more stable tenant. Obviously, I'm impartial to commercial. So residential, let's talk about qualifying. How do we qualify a tenant in residential leases? Credit check, income, maybe some bank account, bank statements, and obviously meeting the tenant. And oftentimes there's an interview process, especially in a home. Okay, how do we qualify a commercial tenant? We'll get into that in a second. Residential tenants now, what are the lease terms? Lease terms are usually 1 to 2 years. So in 1 to 2 years, we may have to look for another tenant. Maybe we might want to, depending on how that tenant plays out. Move-in time. Generally, when the lease is executed, the tenant moves in, right? So they're paying their first month. 30 days later, you get your next check. So that's a pro. Guarantees, well, that's part of the security of the deal. So you're probably just going to get a security deposit if something goes wrong, unless they damage the property. Of course, you can always take them to court. Obviously, we have to worry about co-tenancy in the sense of how does this property going to work? You know, are these folks a fit for my property? Do I feel comfortable, especially if I live in the property, leasing to them? But for the most part, we really don't care, right? We're just looking for a qualified tenant who can pay the money. And past that particular point, unless they're trying to put, 10 or 12 people in a studio, that's really the end of it, okay? Commercial leases. Okay, well, commercial leases, first let's talk about lease term. Lease terms are generally longer, right? Industrial, retail could be 5 years, 10 years is more traditional, could be all the way up to 50 or 100 years I've seen. Office leases sometimes can be a little less. They can be those 1 year leases, but oftentimes they're at least 3. Mostly they fall in the 5 to 7 year range. All right, and why is that important? Well, that's a more bankable lease, meaning I own that property. I can sell that. It's a much more stable asset because I have longer lease term. I'm guaranteeing my new buyer income. Or if I'm buying a property, I can see the lease term the person has left, the business has left. In addition, if I ever want to pull money out from the bank's going to look at, well, what type of income do you have coming in? Are you going to make sufficient income if you pull this additional money out? Okay. Guarantees. So obviously when we're qualifying our tenants, we're going to look at their financials, and sometimes we're going to get a corporate guarantee if it's a larger company, or if it's a particular person that has multiple locations, we may get a corporate guarantee. If it's not, we can still defer back to a personal guarantee, and usually that's for a length of time, meaning a 2 or 3 year guarantee or a 2 year guarantee with a 6 month rolling. What does that mean? If I have let's look at it. If I have a 2 year guarantee on a 10-year lease, it means that I'm guaranteeing the landlord, no matter what, at least 2 years of rental payments. Okay, so if the lease is $50,000 a year, I'm guaranteeing that landlord at least $100,000 a year, $100,000 in total. And usually there's some type of rolling or good guy clause or something after that, which we'll get into at a later date. Okay, let's talk about co-tenancy, right? We remember that with residential, unless they're really pulling in extra people, we're just looking for folks who can pay the rent, who qualify. On a commercial lease, we can use our co-tenants, meaning we have a site, a building, a property with multiple tenants, to either help or potentially could hurt us. Let's take a look at each class. Office. Well, if I have a large company, a large office like JP Morgan, and they want to lease a floor in my office building, that may be great for the building and draw other smaller businesses or like-kind businesses or larger companies to that particular building. What might be a result of that? I might be able to raise the asking price for the rent if I have JP Morgan there, right? It becomes almost a JP Morgan building. Industrial. How would it hurt us? Well, let's say we have an industrial park or an industrial building with a couple of different vacancies, and we have contractors, and we have maybe some semis, Would we want to lease to a recreational user like dance or a wrestling school, MMA, cheerleading? Why wouldn't we? Well, we know a lot of the times those businesses have a lot of children who are entering and exiting the property. It could be a real safety concern for obviously the landlord and the other tenants. If that cheerleading company or dance company or whatever is in there first, and then we rent to, a use that has a lot of moving vehicles in and out, that may be a concern for them. We may lose that particular tenant because of the safety risk for them. Retail. Well, retail, it could help or hurt us because maybe we lease out a portion or a space to a very big name, not for the most rent, but maybe it brings a lot of folks into the shopping center or the strip mall, whatever it is. That, again, may be great for the other businesses. So I'm allowing my other businesses now to, we had a little phone call there, to make more money because they're getting more customers. And if I have vacancies, I can potentially charge more for the rent. However, it could hurt us because retail leases have exclusive clauses. And if we agree for one business to have a lot of exclusives, we may run into issues leasing to other businesses in the future that may have an ancillary use as the same thing, or maybe a part of that exclusive clause that might have nothing to do with their business. Grocery stores and large department stores and often have exclusives against bowling alleys and gyms, and we'll cover that later, but that's one of the reasons you really have to be careful. How about repayment? Okay, when a residential tenant moves in, the lease starts and you get your first month rent at lease signing. 30 days later, you get your next payment. With a commercial tenant, you'll probably get your first month's rent at lease signing, obviously with the security, but the next time you receive a rental payment, okay, may be when they open for business, which could be 6 months, a year, 3 months. They have to take control of the space. They have to get permits. They have to build out. They have to open. They may ask you for 3 months of build out time, 3 months of free rent on top of that. So again, that will all play into that's obviously the norm in retail leases, not so much in industrial leases, and usually a month or so in office leases as well. Again, in office lease, one way a tenant may be a disadvantage is a call center, right? Sometimes these types of businesses have a lot of traffic, or offices that have a lot of traffic flow, which again we'll talk about later on. But guys, those are a couple of things that you should be aware of and you should look at. Again, a commercial lease is generally for a longer term and could be anywhere up to 100 years with or without options. So it's a more bankable tenant, in my opinion. It's more stable. You're resting on companies instead of individuals most of the time. Whereas a residential lease, again, it's really just about a family. One guy loses his job, you may be looking for a new tenant. So people prefer both, or some people prefer residential, some people prefer commercial. This video was just about giving you some insights in both worlds. See you guys on the next one.